Carl laughed as he waved me off in front of a full boardroom. "Sit quiet, you're just the assistant," he said, and the room roared with him. They didn't know I'd already been named their new boss. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The conference room was slick and sterile, every surface polished to a performative gleam, a tray of untouched croissants, overpriced bottled water, and the unmistakable stench of power masquerading as competence. The walls were lined with framed press clippings, outdated headlines about quarterly wins and client expansions. None of them mentioned me. That wasn't surprising. My job was to be invisible. When I entered, no one looked up. Carl and two of his cronies were mid-laugh over some recycled joke from a golf trip I hadn't been invited to. Susan, head of compliance, gave me the tight-lipped smile she reserved for elevators and women she didn't think would last long. Langford didn't bother with small talk, just pointed at the projector and muttered, "Make sure it works this time." It always worked. They talked numbers like they owned them. Misquoted metrics, misattributed wins, the same parade of puffed chests and shallow strategy. Then came the forecast deck. I saw it immediately. A projected YoY growth figure that was inflated by at least 3.7%. Probably intentional. Carl was always sloppy when he was showing off. I didn't correct it publicly. Not at first. I leaned in quietly and said, "Actually, Q2 projections were revised. That number's off." That's when it happened. Carl leaned back, eyes half-lidded with the smugness of someone who'd made one too many women cry in performance reviews. "Sit quiet. You're just the assistant." Just the assistant. The phrase landed like a slap disguised as a joke. The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it echoed. It told me everything I already knew, that no matter how much I prepared, how flawlessly I delivered, how sharp my mind was, I would always be the person who printed agendas and fetched espresso in their eyes. But what they didn't know, what made my smile tighten into something sharper, was that 2 weeks ago, the board asked me to shadow Langford before his retirement. That they were impressed with my numbers, my leadership under pressure, my discretion. That my name was already inked into the next press release. I watched Carl keep talking, utterly unaware he'd just spoken his last words of authority in that room. I poured the coffee anyway. One last time. The instant the final slide flicked off the screen and chairs scraped back with the usual rustle of dismissal, I rose, not hesitantly, but with the deliberate calm of someone who'd rehearsed this moment in silence for weeks. "Gentlemen," I said evenly, letting the air hang for half a beat before adding, "and Susan," turning just slightly toward her with a nod that carried more meaning than a handshake. "You might want to stay seated. I have an announcement." The silence was immediate and different. No more banter, no murmurs, just the faint buzz of the wall clock behind me. Carl smirked from across the table, like I'd confused the meeting with a birthday speech. That's when I placed the folder in the center of the table, smooth, unrushed. "Effective next week," I said, locking eyes with no one and everyone. "Mr. Langford is stepping down. I'll be assuming the role of managing partner." No raised voices, just a stunned vacuum. Susan's pen slipped from her fingers and clattered against the table. Henry blinked rapidly like he hadn't heard me right. Carl's smirk didn't fade. It collapsed. "I'll be reviewing each department's performance," I said, flipping open the folder with the same hands they once tasked with coffee runs. "But not just numbers. I'm looking at leadership, behavior, accountability." I could see the shift in posture, crossed arms uncrossing, jaws tightening. "If you've been coasting, belittling, or siphoning company resources," I added, letting each word pierce, "I'll find it, and I won't hesitate to act." Carl let out a half-laugh, sharp and desperate. "This is ridiculous. You're—" I didn't let him finish. "Still just the assistant?" I cut in. "That's what you thought. That's what you all let yourselves believe. And that—" I slid an envelope across the table toward him. "Is why you're done." His fingers trembled as they brushed the edge of the letter. The smirk didn't return. No one laughed. No one even breathed. They weren't looking at the assistant anymore. They were looking at the person who could take their titles, cut their budgets, erase their legacies, and who just proved she wasn't afraid to do exactly that. The audit wasn't personal. It was surgical. 3 days. That's all it took to peel back the layers of complacency and find the rot beneath the surface. I didn't need spy software or a security team. Just passwords they'd never bothered to change and a sense of where the bodies were buried. There were payments made to a consultancy firm that didn't exist outside of an invoice template. First-class flights billed under client site visits, when the clients were across town. Lavish steakhouse dinners logged under team morale building, yet attended by the same 3 people each time, all of them Carl's inner circle. Then there was the folder hidden in the shared HR drive, its title vague, but its content damning. Dozens of complaints, interns dismissed for attitude problems after refusing late-night calls. A marketing manager who'd filed a report about Carl's language during meetings. Her case was resolved informally. The paper trail was faint, but it was there. By the time day 3 ended, 2 executives had been escorted out by building security. A third handed in a resignation letter scrawled in desperation, as if quitting might save him from the wave already crashing down. I didn't feel a single ripple of pleasure from it. This wasn't revenge. It was maintenance. Cost of restoring something long overdue. Integrity. On the morning of day 4, just as the office was starting to breathe a new kind of air, there was a knock. Susan stepped inside. Her posture was different now, shoulders looser, chin up. "You probably don't need me to say this," she began, tone quiet but steady. "But thank you." I set down the report I was reviewing. "You're next in line for Director of Operations. If you want it." There was a beat of silence. Then her brows lifted, almost unsure whether she'd heard right. "Seriously?" I smiled, not politely, genuinely. "I've been watching. Through every meeting, every crisis. I noticed who showed up early, who stayed late, who actually solved problems." I closed the folder. Turns out, it wasn't the people who wore the biggest titles. It was the ones no one thought were watching. She didn't need to answer. The fire in her eyes already had. The conference room looked the same. Same polished oak, same leather chairs, same skyline view catching the morning light. But everything else had changed. 2 weeks had passed since the audit, and the air no longer carried the stale weight of unspoken hierarchy. It was lighter, sharper, charged with something new. Awareness. When I entered, conversations hushed, not out of fear, but respect. The kind that comes from knowing someone didn't just survive the fire, they walked straight into it and built the exit. Carl's old chair sat empty at the far end of the table. I hadn't removed it. It sat there deliberately, not as a placeholder, but as a reminder of what happens when arrogance replaces accountability, of how easy it is to forget that power isn't inherited, it's observed. No one cracked jokes this time, no eye rolls, no casual dismissals masked as banter. Instead, the people who once pretended not to hear me now leaned forward, notebooks open, pens ready. I noticed how their eyes held focus, not doubt, how their silence wasn't ignorance anymore, it was attention. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Every word landed with weight because they understood now. I wasn't asking to be heard. I had made them listen, and that mattered more than any title. They knew I'd been there all along, in the background, taking notes, solving problems, remembering who did the work and who took the credit. While they measured status by volume, I measured value by impact. I had waited. Not out of weakness, but strategy. I didn't demand respect. I earned it quietly. And when the moment came, I didn't ask for a seat at their table. I redesigned the room. I rewrote the seating chart, not based on seniority, but on substance. Not based on whose voice was loudest, but on who had the courage to act when it counted. Half of the old faces were gone, and in their place were names I had watched grow in the shadows, just like I once had. They called it a leadership meeting. Now, finally, that word meant something.